Welcome, everyone, to the second Lunch and Learn Torah study of the spring 2025 semester. I wanted to talk about lying, not because people might associate lawyers with lying, although I hope you all appreciated my AI-generated flyer with a picture of a lawyer with his pants on fire. If you didn't, I refer you back to the flyer. Did you notice that?
Yes, it all rhymes.
Yeah, that also rhymes, but so it's like a lawyer in court with his pants on fire. I thought it was, thank you AI. For those of you who might know the Marvelous Midos Machine, which is an old song, so I put on I gave this topic at a different school, and then I had a picture of the baby with ketchup on its head. Also, thank you to AI. So I want to talk about lying, especially as it relates to law students. In the topic, there's a very fascinating discussion, which I want to get to, and then the topic in general. Before I begin, I want to make an interesting point. I teach biomedical ethics undergrad at Turo. And there's a column in the New York Times, I think it's the New York Times Magazine, called The Ethicist. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. I think it's on Sunday. So the ethicist is exactly what it sounds like, that there's a man out there who says he's the expert in ethics, and people write in questions. If you take a look, I didn't do a full survey over the past 10 years, but I've been using it to teach undergrad. I would say 50% of the questions relate to telling the truth and lying. Those are like for example, I support politician A. Do I have to tell my coworkers? Or I've done this in the past. I've tell people. Or my husband has dementia. If you look at all the questions, 50% deal with truth telling and telling the truth, and it's a very fundamental question. So I wanted to discuss it today, and especially maybe a little bit from an angle that with law and court and justice. But where does it all come from? How do you know? How do you know? We all know. Okay, you shouldn't lie. How do you know? How do you know you're not supposed to lie? So if you look at the Torah, if you look at the Bible, in Exodus 23:7, it never says don't lie. It says midvar sheker tirchak. Keep away from false things, or even from falsitudes. It doesn't say do not lie. So that's a funny way of saying it. Now, there's a famous piece of the Talmud that speaks about the importance of truth. That truth is the word emet is such an important word. It's the seal of God. So we understand that it must be an important thing. But it doesn't say anywhere, don't lie. I want to show you this to you. Let's say this in the court system of Israel, the Beit Din, or especially in the ancient times, you had, let's say, like today you'd have it. You'd have a clerk. You have a judge and a clerk. Back then they had a court of 3 or 23, but everyone there would be students there. So ask the Talmud an unbelievable question. Imagine there's a student sitting before his teacher, and he sees, meaning the judge, or the judges, and he sees that the judge is about to make a mistake. And he knows that they're going to side for here it is, like they're siding for the poor person versus the wealthy person, and you're a student, you're a clerk. So if you say nothing, right, everything's good. In fact, maybe if you say something, you'll get in trouble. Maybe if you say something, it'll be considered out of turn. Says the Talmud, from where do you know that if you're there and you see your teacher, you're the judge, making a mistake, you have to say something? You're not allowed to remain silent? The answer is midvar sheker tirchak. Stay away from falsitudes. So you see right away that falseness or lying is not a question. Again, what would be doing wrong in that situation? If you'd be quiet. So is it telling a lie that's the problem? No. The problem is being quiet because you're not saying the truth. So if the Torah had just said do not lie, then you wouldn't know that you have to tell the truth when it's important. You would know, just can't tell a lie. So it's interesting from the fact that the way the Torah chose to talk about lying, it never said don't lie. It said don't stay away from falsitudes. Thereby, it includes in it also making sure that you say the truth when it's necessary. Okay. So if you ask most people, everyone knows midvar sheker tirchak sounds very bad. That's, I'm saying, there is a children's song, Midvar Sheker Tirchak, never tell a lie. Is that true? Is never tell a lie true? It's a song, but is it true? And the answer is, of course it's not true. Because God himself lied. So there's a famous piece of Talmud here in the bottom of page 1. It is permitted for a person to depart from the truth in a matter that will bring peace. There are three situations in the Bible. One, when the brothers who had sold Joseph to Egypt, when their father dies, they lie to him and say, our father commanded you to forgive us. It's not true. Secondly, even more so there was King Saul, the first Jewish king, and then the prophet Samuel was sent by God to anoint King David to be the next Jewish king. By the way, king number 1 is never happy when king number 2 is appointed. So Samuel, the prophet, turns to God and says, hey, you're sending me on a suicide mission. What am I supposed to do? If the king finds out that I've just appointed another king, I'm in big trouble. Says the book, again, this is in 1 Samuel 16:2, God said, just say you went to do something else. So God gave the advice to not tell the truth. And lastly and famously, in Genesis, when God speaks to Abraham and Sarah, tells them they're going to have a child in their old age, so Sarah's response was that my husband is old. And when God told Abraham the story, what Sarah had said, instead of saying exactly what Sarah said, God himself told Abraham that Sarah said, I am old, meaning not saying her husband's old. So in a way, God himself lied. So now here's the obvious question. If you're allowed to lie for peace, so anytime you ever lie, you can just say, I did it for a reason. So there's no teeth, there's no meaning to midvar sheker tirchak, stay away from falsitudes, if you could always claim you're doing the right thing. So what does it mean then? Now if you take a look, I just want to make the point, and I want to make the point to make the point the obvious way. There's a Mishnah that talks about lying, and people might mistake this, that you're allowed to lie on your taxes. I want to be very clear, you may not cheat on your taxes. You may not lie on your taxes. We're holding it March 3rd today, and right, everyone's got to fill out their taxes and pay your taxes. In the Mishnah, it's talking about in those days, what happened was, in Mishnaic times, the tax collector would buy the rights to taxes. So the royal, the person in charge would say, okay, I need $10,000 this year. So he'd go to Mr. Smith and say, Mr. Smith, you give me $10,000 and I'll go let you collect taxes. And that was a business because then Mr. Smith went ahead and collected as much as he can because he wanted to make a profit. So he would pay up the taxes to the ruler, and then he would go and collect as much as possible. That's considered an unjust tax. And in such a situation, you're allowed to lie to the tax collector who would not touch your property if you told him it was already designated for the temple. So you're allowed to lie. Say, oh, you see this Diet Coke? I already promised it to God in the Beit HaMikdash, so you can't take it. So that's a lie you were allowed to do. So you see, lying is allowed. But on the other hand, if you say that, then everyone will just always lie and just say, I'm doing it. It's a good idea. And I want to now relate it back before we get to the place that really discusses it, that one source of the Talmud. I want to relate it back to law. If you take a look on page 2 from the Shulchan Aruch, from the Code of Jewish Law, the rule is that in the courts, in the Beit Din, in the Jewish court system, there's always 3 judges. And the majority rules. You can't have 2, because then it'll be a split verdict. So you always have 3 judges. And we understand majority rules. So if 2 say guilty, guilty. If 2 say innocent, innocent. What do you do when 2 say guilty and 1 says, I don't know? What would you think? You would say guilty because it's irrelevant. So interestingly enough, that's not the case. When 2 say guilty and 1 says innocent, you add 2 more judges. That means 2 beats 1, but 2 doesn't beat undecided. So then you get to 5, and 4 beats undecided, but 2 doesn't. So now let's play this scenario. Well, the 3 of us will be judges. Okay? We're deciding whether or not he's guilty or not. Fair? You're guilty for a lot of things, but we'll leave that. Okay? The two of us are deciding. You decided he's guilty. You decided he's guilty. I'm undecided. I think he's innocent. If I say he's innocent, what's going to happen? You're going to win, right? Because 2 versus 1. I have a great idea. I think he's innocent. But if I say he's innocent, what's going to happen? I'm going to lose. So I'm going to say I don't know. And when I say I don't know, what's going to happen now? 2 more judges. And then maybe they'll agree with me and we'll get him off. So I'm going to lie about what I believe so that to get to what I think is true. Am I allowed to do that? There's even a crazier case. What's the crazier case? The law is in capital punishment. Again, it's majority. So usually it's 23 judges or let's say 23 judges. So to convict someone, you has to be at least, I think it's controlled. It's not here. It's controlled. It's crazy. When we first started, it went. You want to speak? Whoever's in charge. So what happened? Carl retires Friday. Now we can't get the. So what? Oh, he's different than the. Oh, okay. But So imagine in a capital case, you need a majority. Fine, fair. There's an interesting quirk in capital cases, and that is if all 23 judges find for guilt, he's innocent. That's the halacha. It's an interesting halacha. Someone just sent me, literally, I didn't read it yet. I was talking to someone on the way here, and he said send me an article, which I did not read, but someone wrote an article about Justice Scalia's favorite Gemara. So you saw this? Justice Scalia's favorite Gemara. And it has to do with this idea of, we'll have to maybe talk about it another time, because I didn't read the article yet, but I was telling you what I'm speaking about today, he sent me this Gemara, this article. But, so if 23 of us, all 23 of us in this room, find that he's guilty, he's innocent. He gets off scot-free. Same question. All 23 of us think he's guilty. If we all say he's guilty, what's going to happen? He gets off. So why don't I lie, say he's innocent, then it's 22-1, then he'll really be guilty? Am I allowed to lie what I believe so that the justice, which I think is the right justice, should come out? What do you guys think? Anyone? Any thoughts? So take a look here. Again, I have here on page 2, I have the Shulchan Aruch just setting up the situation. And then I didn't have a chance to translate it from Hebrew to English. But in the bottom, that's the Pischei Tshuva, asking that first question. And on page 3, this is in English. In Exodus, in Shmos, it says, you may not, do not follow the majority to do evil. And do not respond with your opinion in a dispute merely to lean toward one side. It must be decided by a majority. That's where we get, that's the biblical source, that court cases are decided by the majority. But the Orach Chaim, famous commentator of the 17th century, he writes here, our verse intends to remove 2 obstacles, which may mislead a scholar when he ponders the meaning of this ruling. When a judge sits with his judges and notices that all his colleagues have made up their mind that the accused is guilty, whereas he feels the accused is innocent, he'll say to himself, like I just told you, I could go ahead and say, if I say innocent, I lose. So if I say I'm uncertain, right? See, he will justify his behavior by recalling the dictum of the sages that when faced by the majority, one must not insist on one's own opinion. The Torah instructs such a judge not to apply this dictum. One must only vote one's own conscience, even if the result of such a vote does not correspond to one's wishes or convictions. So here you have the Orach Chaim's least opinion. Again, it's a debate, but the Orach Chaim's opinion is you can't lie to get the truth. Because what do you believe the truth is? He's innocent. So you have to lie to say you don't know to get the innocent. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to lie to get the truth. It's better to say the truth, which will result in a lie, than to lie to get to the truth. Do we? No one disagrees? Everyone agrees? Can you explain that again? Again, 3 of us. Justify the ends. So the 3 of us are deciding whether he's guilty or innocent. They think he's guilty. I think he's innocent. If I say innocent, he's going to be found guilty because 2 beats 1. So I'm going to lie and say I don't know, and then perhaps 2 other judges will be added to make it 5. Maybe then I could convince those guys, and then 3 beats 2, and he'll come out innocent. So I lie to say I don't know to get out with the truth, which I know is true, that he's innocent. But if I say the truth that he's innocent, he's going to end up being guilty, which is not true. So are you allowed to do that? Yes. You would think you're allowed to do that, right? But the Orach Chaim says not. No. And again, others say yes. I want to make it clear that it's a machlokes. I want to make clear that it's a debate. But it touches at the core of the question. If it said in the Torah, do not lie, so then there'll be no issue. You cannot lie. But it doesn't say that. What does it say? It says stay away from falsehoods. So then that's where the opening is. Well, who says it's a falsehood if the results are the truth? And we proved it from God himself. Because God himself, when he spoke to Avraham told him the mistruth of what Sarah said because he didn't want. So now, how do you know? So there is a very, and I'll bring you one more Gemara. Look at the bottom of page 4. It's a fascinating story. It's a cute story. Maybe not so cute. There was a rabbi, his name was Rav. And for some reason, Rav and his wife didn't get along. Or maybe she was just being annoying. I don't know. And whenever he asked for, he gave whatever he wanted for dinner, she made the opposite. When he said, I would love to have lentils for dinner, she made peas. And whenever he said, I'd like some peas, she made lentils. So Rav, every day, asked for X, got Y. Whatever, or asked for Y, got X. Their son, Chia, realized what's going on. So he said, I have a great idea. He said, Dad, you tell me what you want for dinner. No problem. And he would go to his mother and say, Dad wants peas. Really, what he wanted, lentils. That way, and it worked out. Rav got what he wanted. The wife thought she was, right? Everyone was happy. She thought she was making him upset. He was really getting the food he wanted. Perfect situation, except one problem. So now, Rav turns to his son Chia, who didn't know what's going on, and said, wow, your mother really, she's done tshuva. She now makes what I like. So Chia said, I got to tell you the truth, Dad. Nah, it's me. It's all me. I figured it out. It's perfect. So he turns to his son. Look at the bottom line. Now, what would you have said? Again, if Chia was your son, if you were Rav, what would you say? Hey, midvar sheker tirchak, stay away from falsehoods. He doesn't say that. He brings a totally different verse. A verse from Jeremiah, from Yirmiyahu. The verse says, Limdu l'shonam dvar sheker. They have taught their tongue to speak lies. Why does he bring a random verse? Why does he just say, don't lie? Right? Wouldn't that be the right answer? Would that be the correct rebuke of your son? Stop lying to your mother. But he doesn't say that. He says, you're just so caught up in falsehoods. I want to explain this all with what I think is a famous Gemara. Top of page 5. How does one dance before the bride? Kate said, "Meraktim lefnei hakala." That doesn't mean literally dancing. It means you have a guy, the couple getting married, and you want to say to the guy, "Wow, it goes both ways, men to women, women to men." You want to praise the bride here. So Beis Shammai says you got to tell the truth. You got to tell the truth. It's like when you go to a meal, someone invites you to a meal, a home cooked meal, and everything's disgusting, and you say, "Wow, you really know how to pick out the good hummus from the store." Right? That's right. You bought excellent challah in the store. What are you going to say? Everything was disgusting. So you say you know how to buy challah, or thank you for buying Diet Coke. Thank you. What are you going to say? Same thing about the challah, but I don't want to talk about people. And Beis Hillel says no. You're allowed to lie. You're allowed to say, "Oh, kala no v'chasuda. What a beautiful bride. I love the chicken that you made. It was unedible. But I love that you're allowed to say that." Beis Shammai turns to Beis Hillel and says, what do you do when the bride is lame or blind? Meaning, how could you lie? You can't say it. Midvar sheker tirchak. Keep away from false matter. Now, if I was Beis Hillel, what would I have answered? I would have answered, hello, Rabbi Fogel just taught us 20 minutes ago that you can lie for peace. Beis Hillel says something interesting. He says, I'll explain it to you with a parable. I can say this. I have a Samsung. Okay, I have a Samsung. I think anyone who has an Apple is crazy. All my teenage daughters have Apple. Okay, fair. But I think that buying an Apple is crazy. Let's say, I have it better. So someone here's got an Apple Watch. I went for the Amazon $25 cheap pretend Fitbit. Why spend more money? So now you come to me and you say, Rabbi Fogel, look at my new Apple Watch. I spent $300, great deal. So now, really deep down, I think you made a mistake. Case in point, right? But I'm allowed to tell you, wow, great deal, great move. Apple Watch, top of the line technology, great idea. Why? Because says that's Beis Hillel's mashal. I mean, not with the Apple Watch. If a man buys something inferior in the market, what do you say to him? You say, great purchase. Why? Because he thought it was a great purchase. He obviously spent $300 instead of $35. He spent $300 to buy that watch. He thought it was a good idea. Because he thought it was a good idea, when you talk to him, you're allowed to say it's a good idea because it's true in his eyes. It's not, so what is Beis Hillel saying? It's not lying because, you're preventing them providing. It's not lying because it's truth to him. In his eyes, it's true. And what's the parable? Whatever this bride looks like, her husband loves her. Her husband thinks, right? The famous, how's it go? Love turns a pimple into a dimple. He thinks that she's the best, the most beautiful, the sweetest person there is. She might not be so sweet, but who cares? You say he thinks that way, so you tell it to him. You're telling him the truth in his eyes. So here you have a very interesting new idea, and it goes even further. I'm going to show it to you. This is how the Talmud ends the question. There is on the bottom of the page. I have it in English. There's it's called a minor tractate. It's not really part of the main part of the Talmud, but it's called Meseches Kal Rabasi. It's like a minor tractate of the Talmud. It's not always learned so much, and it actually explains this debate even further. If you're in the bottom, and again, Beis Shammai says, "What about lying?" So Beis Hillel answers back. Maybe actually that if you look at the Torah verse which we started with, it might only be talking about court systems. It might not be talking about interpersonal relationships. But still, the Talmud, this Meseches Kal asked, why did Beis Hillel just answer from this weird comparison to buying something? Just say straight out, like we learned from Sarah, that you're allowed to say you're allowed to lie for the truth, or you're allowed to lie for a purpose. Pardon me. And look at the bottom line on page 5. There is no question that what we say is correct according to the Torah, but it is also correct by the standards of human being. Now, if I would have written that line, you probably would be throwing stones at me. So what kind of rabbi says such a ridiculous thing? Except Beis Hillel said it in the Talmud, so I'm okay. Let's understand what this line says. This line says that, you're right, Beis Hillel said, I could have answered you, I could have said that you're allowed to lie when you think it's a good idea. But I didn't tell you that. Because I wanted it to be correct by this. That's a Torah rule. But it's not. I wanted it to be a human being rule also. Now, I'd be nervous as a rabbi if you told me that. Because then you're telling me something, Torah, human beings, how do you like, are there two systems of what's right? We have a class, we've spoken about this in the past, of are there ethics that are like more moral than the law? Is there idea if the law says something is permitted? Is there like a morality saying you still shouldn't do it? So Beis Hillel is sort of referring to that here, and here I believe that's the crux of the issue. The crux of the issue is because the Torah chose to tell you not to lie by not saying don't lie, by saying stay away from falsehood. It opened the door to people always using that to their advantage, as God himself did. That if it would be a horrible thing to say the truth, it's better to say a lie. But then you could always be doing that. And I think that is the idea back into Rav's idea, when Rav told the son, listen, what you did is actually a good idea. I thought my wife is a better wife now. You actually had a great idea. You made a couple happy, perfect. But you know what? It's a bad idea as a human. That's why he brings the pasuk in Jeremiah. They've taught their tongues to speak falsehoods. Because it's not a good idea to always be thinking, what will the result be, and can I say so? Because I have a justification. If I say the wrong thing for the right purpose, then I'm okay. I'm good. And you'll always be lying. On the other hand, you're allowed to do it. On the other hand, if you always do it, it's horrible. And that's exactly what Beis Hillel tells Beis Shammai. I need this extra idea. That's what he brings from buying and selling. To just say, okay, if you need to lie, it's not good. Because you can end up being a liar. You can end up being someone who just throws all truth in the garbage. But you need to be someone, if you're going to do it, it has to be true in their eyes. There has to be, you can't lie. You have to say, if I'm going to say something, which I don't think is true, it has to be true in their eyes. That's why, at least I believe, there's a debate about the court cases. Because the court cases, it is, in other words, he thinks he's innocent. So there is a truth to it. Although, on the other hand, the Or Chaim feels that you're saying something false, you can't do it. So I understand, but the only time we're allowed to do it, I think that's the depth of Beis Hillel and others, is that you can only say it if you can also understand why it's also truth. I want to show you something interesting. Yeah. The Gemara tells us, and I wanted the last page. We have 2 more minutes. I just want to speak it out. It's a very sad, one of the difficult things that we're dealing with, unfortunately, as the Jewish people in the world today with the hostages. There are people who have been dead, and for a while, we have to be honest, and it's a difficult situation, and they're more and more difficult, and there have been difficult situations. When I was thinking about it the past few weeks, this Gemara and this Shulchan Aruch came to me, and again, it's relevant to today, but even talking about these things, especially a lot of these things happened over the weekend, and you don't listen to the news, and you want to open the news on Saturday night. There's a famous Gemara that Rav was, we just spoke about him, his uncle was Rabbi Chia, but he was an uncle 2 ways. So they call it today kissing cousins, I think that's what they call it. So Rav's parents were one's a nephew, one was a niece of Rabbi Chia, but they weren't related to each other. So kissing cousins got married. So the couple, Rav's parents, were both related to Rabbi Chia, but independently. So he comes in, and Rav came to visit his uncle, and so Rabbi Chia said, "Hey, how's your father doing? My cousin, your father." So Rav didn't want to say. He said, "Oh, why ask me about my father? Ask me about my mother." So he says, "Okay. Hey, Rav, how's your mother doing?" He goes, "I didn't answer you about my father. You already asking me about my mother?" That's the case of the Talmud. And Rav Chia understood that they both had passed on, but Rav didn't want to say anything. And we learn from there halacha. The halacha is very interesting. There is no obligation to tell someone that a loved one passed away. If you know someone who has a loved one who passed away, you don't have to tell them. You can hide it. Not only that, they'll tell you, "Hey, I'm going to a wedding tonight. Have fun." Now, they're in Avelut, they're not to go to a wedding. Just don't tell them. That's the halacha. And it's not only that, if you tell them, you are betraying a verse in Proverbs which says, "He who concealed hatred has lying lips, and while he who speaks forth slander is a dullard." Meaning, if you say things, you're a fool. Okay, fine. Interesting question. By the way, this is a very interesting question. What if there is a hostage and whose families had passed on? Like, how long should you hide it from them? This was a real life question. But then it goes further. What if they ask? So now, what would I say? If you're allowed to not tell them, so why can't you lie to them? Says the halacha, if they ask, you can't lie. Midvar sheker tirchak. What do you mean? Midvar sheker tirchak, I already know that I could lie for a purpose. So you see here, and again, there's a lot of, we're not going to go into it, but it really stuck out to me that the idea of midvar sheker tirchak is on one hand saying, stay away from all falsehoods. On the other hand, opens the door for allowing us to think of how our words impact others, and if needed be, say something that might not be true. On the other hand, if you always do that, you're always going to lie. On the other hand, you have to be careful what you say. You have to always take the other person, especially in these very delicate situations, what you say. So the Today's topic was lying, a brief introduction. I think the brief introduction is the whole picture. But the reason it's so difficult, as I said, is that if you want to go case by case, you can be the ethicist. There are hundreds of scenarios where you and every one of us are faced with these saying the truth, saying a lie, thinking about the right reason, thinking of all these things, and how to balance the idea of staying away from falsehoods at the same time making sure you either get the result you want or get that is true. I mean, not that you want that is true, or make sure you don't hurt someone. And I think those are the difficult questions when we deal with lying. So I thank you all for joining us. I'd like to invite you all. Next week at this time, it is not Purim, but we'll be preparing for Purim here at Torah Law. And I'd like to invite you all. Please stay tuned to your flyers and to wherever you get your Torah Jewish information. And we'd love to see you then. And without further ado, we are now going to switch to a Jilsa meeting.